Okay. Can we please be seated? Okay, so we have our new athletic director-elect here with us tonight. So I'd like to change up the agenda a little bit. I'd like to have a motion to go into non-public to start the meeting.
So moved.
Okay. Chen, second. Gronstra. Roll call.
Gronster, yes.
Brown, yes.
Chen, yes.
Manning, yes.
Copeland, yes.
Stacy, yes.
All right, that's it.
We'll step out.
We're going to step out.
Dwayne.
Dwayne is going to be on the
Dwayne's-
phone eventually, but he's not called in yet.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna take it in here. We'll be right back.
Like the whole board or just you guys?
Sorry, guys.
What?
Do a little dance. Okay, this is an odd.
Hey, good.
Cool. Nick is my mentee, and so I wanted to get a picture for him. Would it be nice if you Okay, absolutely. Great.
Every time I come back, the room gets fuller. No idea.
All right, we already voted to come out of non-public in the other room, so I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent-elect.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to place into nomination a new athletic director for Souhegan High School. Dan Wybrany comes to us from the Nashua School District. He is an incredibly accomplished soccer coach and program director, spanning many, many years. Comes highly acclaimed, happens to be a resident in our town as well. And we are extremely fortunate to have him be our next athletic director at Souhegan Cooperative High School. So with that, I place into nomination Dan Wybrany as athletic director at a salary of $90,000, effective July 1st of 2018.
Congratulations.
How about a vote? Let's make it real.
All right, so who would like to be the person, we have to have a motion to actually elect him, so who would like to do that? Okay, do we have a second? Howard seconds. Discussion? Okay, no. All right, let's take a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? It's unanimous. Congrats.
Congratulations.
Could you also make notation that we were in non-public under RSA 91A3, Section 2A and B? I forgot to mention that, sorry. Okay, next order of business. We are going to enter into a public hearing at 6:12 p.m. So I'd like to call the public hearing to order. We are going to, accept the nomination?
Yeah, so this is a 19820B public hearing. Anytime the school board accepts a donation of $5,000 or more, there has to be an opportunity for the public to weigh in on that donation prior to the board voting to accept that donation. So this is $5,000 from the New Hampshire Humanities Council to support the Ethics Forum HYPE.
Do we have any comments from the public? Okay. Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion.
Amy, and then Pim, second. Discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Unanimous. Great. Close the public hearing. And at this time, I'd like to open the regular meeting at 6:13 p.m. So at this time, if I could ask everybody to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. No, we're going to skip the moment of silence, and in the interest of time, we're also going to skip the reading of the Souhegan Constitution until the next meeting. If that's okay with everybody. You guys good with that?
Yes.
Okay. Next on the agenda is announcements. So I'll send it over to Adam.
Thank you. I just have a few things, Mr. Chairman. First, we discussed at the last meeting a math evaluation being conducted. The cost in Amherst was $15,000, which was, and the one that's being proposed here is a little bit more expensive since it's 3 years later. It requires more data analysis because of the different assessments used. But we're going to be recommending that the board approve that per our discussion at the last meeting. And the total cost is $22,000. We have copies if the board would like to review those, but we would be looking for the board to take a motion to approve that this evening. Next, there was some questions about the memorandum of understanding and the job description for the student resource officer at the last meeting. The memorandum of understanding dates way back to, I have it right here, goes back to 2011, I think it is. Has not been updated in some time and is due to be updated. I've also checked with, and the two people that signed that were Mary Jennings and Chief Peter Lyon, so that should give you a framework for how that MOU was. So the MOU is ready to be, needs to be updated. My understanding is there has been some conversation about doing that. I also checked with Chief Reams about the job description for the SRO, and there is not a specific job description for the SRO beyond a typical officer and their responsibility. The other question raised by a board member was the amount of time in the building as opposed to out of the building, and Chief Reams indicated that in a given school year there's no more than 10 to 15 days where an SRO has to be out of the building for training or other obligations in the district. So those were questions that the board had asked last time. I wanted to.
Adam, is that including the week off that usually goes up on winter session?
Yeah, so 10 was the number Chief Reams provided, and then he reminded me about winter session, so that gets us to 15. We're not sure if the new SRO will be doing that, hence why I said 10 to 15 to cut a hedge there. So that's it exactly. Senate Bill 193 went through the House today. It actually was voted down by the House yesterday and referred to interim study. And then today there's a motion to reconsider in the House, and that also was rejected by the House of Representatives. So those of you tracking Senate Bill 193, that has been rejected for now. And then my final comment will be about the master schedule. We have received course sign-ups from all of our students thus far, and Rob and his team are hard at work at working the numbers to see the number of sections and the number of courses that will be offered. We'll be providing that information to the board at the June meeting to say where we stand in terms of schedules and the master schedule. And with that concludes my comments, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, do we want to vote on the original?
Please. Motion to approve the math evaluation for
Okay. All right, so we need to go back to get a motion to approve the math evaluation for $22,000. So can I have a motion to approve?
Is there going to be any discussion? Can there be any discussion?
Absolutely.
After the motion?
Yep. Yep.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, do we have a second? Howard seconds. Discussion. Tim and then David.
So it's $22,000?
Yes.
And it's coming out of this year or next year's budget?
This year.
This year, and we have that money to be able to do that.
We do.
Okay, thank you.
David?
The vendor, who's the vendor going to be?
Christine.
Yes, there are actually two consultants that used to own the company EdVisualize, which is the company that we worked with for the Amherst math program evaluation. That company is no longer in business. They've since retired. However, they're still doing consulting, so it's still the same two consultants. It's just we're paying them as consultants, not as an organization or company.
Is this the proposal that will be used for?
Sorry.
Is this the proposal that's going to be used with them to evaluate this thing?
Yeah, this is their proposal that they've prepared for the Souhegan School Board to provide any feedback if needed. But this, they felt pretty strongly that because the data analysis is a little bit different than what they did for Amherst, that you would need to have all of these three components. They're exploring three different questions in this proposal.
Any other questions? Anybody else? David, go ahead.
This is the first time I've seen this proposal. Has anybody else seen it before this? No. So we're voting on something we haven't had a chance to read it.
Well, if you'll, if I may,
Go ahead,
if you'll
please.
recall at the last meeting, Howard Brown actually made a motion to approve those funds, and then there was a subsequent motion to table subsequent to the next meeting, us bringing the proposal forward. So we're happy if the board wants to wait another month until the next meeting to approve, now that you have the proposal in your hands. But we were responding last time when the board almost voted to approve, and then we decided, I believe, close to the next morning that we would table it until this meeting.
Yeah. Additional discussion. Howard and David.
When would they start this?
They would actually start it as soon as we sent them our assessment data. They would work on the assessment data right away this spring and summer, and then they would do the two other evaluation pieces, which is a teacher survey and a student survey in the fall.
David.
So when they initially sent it, the initial thing you sent out to Christine,
That was the final
yeah, no, I know.
product for
But the-
Amherst.
But they touted themselves as being NEWA experts in NEWA testing. And we haven't used NEWA, really. We've used, our assessment tests are based on NECAP and then Smarter Balance and then the SATs. So is there something about this that, why are we focusing, are we going to back and focus on NEWA? Is that what this is all about?
No, so this, the company EdVisualize used to actually have a software product that took NWEA data and actually reformatted it to make it more user-friendly for teachers. NEWA since improved their own product, where this company no longer needed to exist to actually be an add-on to NWEA, and the two gentlemen in this proposal who would be our consultants, you know, they have deep experience with data and with program evaluation. It just happened that they owned this software company called EdVisualize that did this data analysis. But they've done program evaluations for other school districts. Often they use NWEA data because it has both growth data and achievement data, so it's really helpful in doing an analysis, and they would be using, they would be looking at NWEA, PSAT, and SAT in this evaluation.
Steve.
I'm going to leapfrog my own comment here. We've been using NEWA for well over 10 years. It's the strongest longitudinal data set we have. So I don't mind them looking at NEWA stuff. It would be very helpful. The real comment I was going to make when I raised my hand was, we have it on the meeting in 3 weeks, so we could probably digest and make a decision on May 22nd, I believe it is.
You stole my headline. That's where I was going to make a comment myself. Does that give you time if we do that?
But does that hold us up on getting this done?
3 weeks.
3 weeks?
3 weeks. Is that going to be acceptable for your timeline, or?
Yeah, so they probably would not be comfortable sharing the data analysis part until they had the survey data from teachers and students in the fall anyway, because they feel that provides a complete picture. So I don't think it's slowing us down at the end.
That's what I meant when I said this is going to hold us down.
No, not waiting 3 weeks, I don't think significantly.
Okay, and then Amy.
So Christine, I know the students have gotten the SAT results. Have you gotten those yet? And will you be able to use that data set in this analysis?
So, and I'm going to look to Karen to confirm. I know the students did get the SAT data. We did not yet, correct, Karen? Right.
Okay.
So we didn't even know students were getting it. All of a sudden we heard they had it. We were digging in and trying to figure out why we didn't yet. I'd love to include this year's SAT data in, as long as, again, it doesn't hold it up. So if we're going to be able to get access to that soon, that would be included. And again, if they're still working on it and can add that data in, if we get it, you know, a few weeks after or something.
Because I think it would be great, because this is the third year, right? So it would be nice to have the 3 years.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that the most expeditious way to handle this would be, we have a motion to approve. It sounds like we want to table Howard's original motion to the next meeting. So the easiest thing would be for Tim and Howard to withdraw their motion, if that's something you want to do. Or we can vote on it right now.
No, that's fine. I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay. So Tim withdraws the motion, and we'll table it to the meeting on May 22nd. Okay?
Thank you.
Great. Next item, principals reports.
And welcome, everybody. A few thank yous to begin. One to Jeff Hall, who is leaving us after years of dedicated service to technology at SHS. We also had our career day recently, and there's a pretty lengthy list of folks who helped with that. We're about 5 years in, and you'll hear about that a little bit later in the report, but it's a great day for us to create partnerships with the local community. Also, Kim Wyberny for her work. She was one of many in what is becoming kind of a co-facilitated, healthy connections between the middle school and the high school. It was a very well-received and well-attended presentation by Lynn Lyon, who's a social worker and psychotherapist, and the title was Managing Anxieties at School and Home. So, as I said, very well-attended. I hope you get a chance to check out our website for highlights and recognition I will just detail a few. This is becoming something somewhat regular for us. Lily Hip, she was selected as a finalist in the New Hampshire Student Film Festival for her animation, Something Fishy. Isabel Bloom was awarded the Spanish Honor Society Scholarship. It's a national award. It's very prestigious. Only 60 students from over 2,400 chapters across the United States get it. So that's a testament, of course, to Isabel and our World Language Department. And Chloe Bertrand, who was featured in the cover of New Hampshire Business Magazine. I don't know if you got a chance to see that. And it was an article highlighting Chloe's experience entering the workforce. The other thing I'd like to highlight is March 13th, the Performance Assessments for Science Symposium. The New Hampshire Science Teachers Association and the New Hampshire Department of Ed sponsor this workshop, and Sue Downer from our science department was the keynote speaker. And again, it's a testament to the work that Sue's doing, the work of Souhegan High School and around performance assessments and mastery learning. So just some highlights for the from the May website. Updates, NEASC, our timeline, we continue that April, May is where our reports are being accepted or revised. So teachers, community members, all faculty, staff, students have been working on reports based on each standard, and we've so far approved standards 167 around values, school resources, and community resources for learning. And what's left at the May 16th meeting are the reports on curriculum, instruction, assessment, and school culture. So we'll be finalizing that hopefully by this summer, and then the steering committee will take over and start getting ready for next October's NEAS visit. Hiring, the folks that asked about Officer Smith leaving, so School Resource Officer Heather Blaze has been with the Amherst Police Department since 2012 and will be assuming the role as School Resource Officer next year. She's very excited to take on this new challenge in her career, and she'll be shadowing Officer Smith. She started this week visiting classes and advisory as she develops a sense of student, staff, and culture. A little bit of an extension of what Adam mentioned just this afternoon. We made a discovery because Adam talked about a job description. We did find one a little outdated, so there'll be an opportunity to update from our end the job description, and happy to share that next month if you'd like. Also this year, one of our main focus areas has been creating productive partnerships. As I mentioned earlier, our Career Day, it's our 5th rendition of the 10th grade career panels, occurred on April 20th. 46 community members, including 12 SHS alumni, participated in panels designed to develop appreciation and understanding of various career paths. This experience has become a critical element in our efforts to provide authentic context to student learning. You've heard this year, you'll hear a lot more going forward next year about extended learning opportunities, authentic learning. So what we do with the Career Day is also an opportunity to develop partnerships that might turn into job shadows, independent studies, extended learning opportunities, etc. So Tim Petro and his folks are working on creating some authentic experiences, and the Career Day is a day where we bring some of those folks in and we extend those relationships going further. Another one I'd like to mention, because we'll likely be talking about it a little bit more, under the Competency Mastery-Based Learning environment, the Mastery Transcript Consortium reached out to us, and that's a group that we're interested in developing a partnership with. Souhegan representatives attended by invitation a meeting at Bow High School, facilitated by the Mastery Transcript Consortium, and this group is interested in developing New Hampshire public-private partnerships in an attempt to foster deep mastery-based learning and to share our experiences and ideas as we develop all the elements necessary for creating a personalized student experience. So we'll be doing a little bit of inventory of our needs and what partnerships we've created. One of the areas that we wanted to develop some more capacity in is the development of a transcript that's at the end of a competency-based education. And we're really excited about this group because it will connect us. Next year, we're going to join the prototype team, which will allow us at least monthly connections with other schools involved in the same work that we're doing at the national level. I think this group, and Christine can probably reinforce this, is very interested in us becoming a membership school as well, which would allow us access to what's being developed. But from 30,000 feet, this is another partnership that we're creating to develop capacity and expertise among our staff as we evolve into the mastery and the deeper learning system. And this group, we think, might have some value to us. Next year, we'll definitely be with the prototype team, which will help facilitate connections as we share our work. And then we'll see about membership after that. Yep.
Okay. Any questions for Rob regarding his principal's report? Going once? Twice? Okay. Thanks, Rob. Appreciate the update, the work you put into that. Next, community council reports. Mitchell.
So a pretty light report for this month. Of course, security will be coming later. We recently had Attleboro High School come to community council and tour Souhegan, and we have a number of schools that have expressed interest in coming to Souhegan next year to see how we do things here and witness our unique culture. We had a weighted GPA proposal, which I introduced last time, that we have tabled until next year. And we're currently discussing a sign language class at Souhegan, form of ASL, that we're considering whether or not it would be full year course or just a one-level semester course, and we're weighing those options, but we hope to reach a verdict by the end of the year because the student proposing it is a senior and this is part of their senior project.
Okay, great. You good?
Yep.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Jacobs? No. Wow, we're not chatty at all tonight. Okay, thanks, Mitchell. Appreciate it.
Trying to help you hit your goal.
Yeah.
Not doing too bad.
All right. Would anybody like to provide an update on any committee reports for a committee that they are aware that they are currently on? Given the fact we're really not discussing that until the 22nd. But Steve.
Yeah, so just for the edification of the board members, you'll notice under the consent agenda, there are approximately 10,000 personnel policies that are there. And really 10, not 10,000, I was joking. In parallel with the work we did around negotiating the new agreement with the staff, Carrie James from the SAU HR department went through all of our personnel policies and did a close read to make sure the policies reflected our actual practice on both sides. She was doing what they said, and they reflected what was really happening as required by law or whatever. And also correcting ambiguities and confusing phrasings. So after the March election, Carrie and PPC went through and read all these policies, and we agreed to the changes in your packet tonight. And the reason it's on a consent agenda is it changes nothing except make the language reflect a clearer reality. So there's no change in policy whatsoever, except the policies read better now. So that's why it's on the consent agenda. So keep that in mind when you're voting for the consent agenda.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
So what I hear you saying is nothing controversial on that list.
There is nothing controversial on that list.
Okay.
And I'm also very confident because I inadvertently made an error in one of the policies, and 4 different reviewers got back to me spotting the error. It was very deep.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Any questions for Steve?
Yeah, now every year we go through this after the PPC, and there are some that we have to change because the numbers and things changed. These will not have to change again after this.
Right. So we approved the vote-related ones at the last meeting. So this is laid on top of those changes. So one of the policies here is actually one we did last month, but got other bits clarified.
David.
Does this have to go back to the SAU?
No, these are, no.
So this is the final reading?
Yeah, these are all policies that only exist at Souhegan because of our unique negotiating structure.
Any other questions for Steve? Okay. Any other committee reports? No? I do want to give one quick update. So I am the liaison to the Advisory Finance Committee. And I did want to make everybody aware of the fact that a couple of weeks ago, I can't remember the exact date, but Craig Fraley, the director of the Rec Department, and myself and Lisa Eastland, the representative from the Advisory Finance Committee, did meet to talk about our situation with the turf field. So we met for about an hour. No resolution came from it, but I did want to let everybody know I do have some greater insight into what their perspective is in terms of why we're falling short. And as soon as our new athletic director is installed, we're going to take all the problems over to you. As soon as Dan takes over, the four of us will sit down and we can talk about some options that we think are, that are. Go ahead.
You wrap me into.
Oh yes, you'll be part of that. Yeah, absolutely. We'll pull everybody in after June 30th. Okay. Any questions about that? Or no? Okay. All right, moving on. This is the part of the meeting where we open everything up to public comment. So we have the podium there. Do we have any comments from the public? Because we actually got a full room, so if you have a question, go for it. No? No. Going once, going twice. Public has nothing to say. Fantastic. Consent agenda. So I'll just open it up by saying, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'd like to pull the minutes.
Okay, motion to pull the minutes? Or you don't have to have the motion, but yeah, pull the minutes. Okay. So we're going to, go ahead.
I just need to clarify. Usually I don't really care, but in this particular instance, on line 92, it was said that I had added that with the athletic liaison, again, that I had added, that Mount Vernon had no stake in the game. It's really the Amherst Recreation, Amherst Rec Committee is what it is, not athletic liaison.
What line was that?
92.
92. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? You got that? Okay, great.
So move to approve the consent agenda with the minutes as amended.
Wonderful. Second? Second by Tim. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Unanimous? All right. Moving on from the consent agenda. Next we have presentations and reports. Senior project presentations. Who's up first? Mr. Freud. What do you got for us, Nick?
So you can actually go to.
No, I can.
Yeah, I'll give you one.
Okay. Go to the podium. All right.
I think there's an issue with
So while this is getting set up, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming, and my volleyball team, and my parents, and my senior mentor, Melissa Chapman's here as well. And because I'm a little nervous and my coach probably wants to get to practice, I'm going to make this nice and short. So this is my senior project applied piece. Oh, can't see you there. So this is my senior project applied piece. And so my essential question for my senior project is why is building community important? And how can public access to recreational activities and facilities build healthy, strong communities? And my sub-essential questions are, what is community? Why is it important? How do you build community? And what is essential for a thriving community? So my applied piece is my proposal, which I'm proposing to you guys today, is the proposal to build a beach volleyball court here at Souhegan. And the reason why I chose this is because I really have a passion for volleyball. I love it. It's a sport where I find myself very included, and it's where I found my kind of outlet in high school. And I also feel like I want to share this with many other people to see if they find interest in it as much as I did. Like I mentioned, I'm on the volleyball team, and I also am a manager for the girls volleyball team in the fall. So as you can tell, I kind of really like volleyball. And I also want to give back to the community, kind of just share and help people, like I said, find their niche and find what they like, and hopefully they can do it through a beach volleyball court. So my purpose would be anyone can use it. Obviously, during school time, it's not fully open to the public, but after school time, it could be open to anyone. It would be beneficial for kids after school, or basically anyone that wants to get out and get some exercise, or just have like a fun alternative activity. And my plan of action is to, as soon as this meeting's done and as soon as I hear a word on whether or not this can be approved or not, my plan of action is to get started right away, kind of talk with so I've already talked to the rec department about it, I've talked to the school about it, and now I'm bringing it to the board for a confirmation on it, and I want to get this filled right away so I can see it as I leave on graduation. So the cost and funding for this. So this is a big part, what you guys are probably all wondering about. So I asked the rec department if they could use this as an activity, and Craig Fraley, who is the head of the rec department, said that he would be more than willing to use this. And he would also use it for clubs over the summer, all ages clubs, basically pay to play for anyone that's not from here. You can still come on Vernon to pay a small fee to come play, but he is more than willing to have this as an activity for the summer. How I'm planning to pay for it is I'm going to ask for a $10,000 from the board, and I'm also going to fill the rest in with either a volleyball team fundraiser, or if there's any room in the budget that we can squeeze. But I also listed out the materials and the prices of what this would cost. So supporters and users, the rec department, as I mentioned, the volleyball team, I'm sure I'd see you guys out there, and a club or school-related organization, because I know the first weeks of school we have a club day where you can go make a club or join a club, and this is just a perfect opportunity for either one of those. And so for my desired location, me and Melissa went out today and we mapped out where it would be. So in the black on the top right, you can see a zoomed in area of the school near the track, and we went out and measured it, and it fits perfectly where there's nothing there other than grass, just waiting for some sand to be put on it. So, I mean, seeing whether or not this is passed, that's where I'd put it, and I'm sure it would be really useful and a lot of people would find it fun. So that's all I have to present to you. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Nick? Tim.
Good job, Nick. So you're asking for $10,000 to be approved by the board for out of a 12K budget, right? I wish Craig was here. I don't think he's here. I would ask him what essentially the Amherst Rec program is going to do, as you know, what their skin in the game is. I don't know if you've had those types of conversations with him.
So when I had talked with him, I asked him basically how their organizations work, how they're funded, and he said usually there's a small fee you pay in the beginning, even though it's town and you can just join. He did say that there's a fee involved, and also there's like another fee if you're not from here. So I'm sure if the $10,000 cannot come from the board, the fee would be increased until it's paid off. I mean, that's just a thought I had. I'd have to follow up with Craig to see if there's any other way he could get the rec to help pay for this at all.
Yeah, I guess my question is what is the fee paying for? Is it paying for the upkeep? Who's responsible for the upkeep of the volleyball
For the
court?
upkeep, I was going to I have a plan with the National Honor Society to figure out a way of community service hours, because we need 40 before we graduate, and seniors are always in a crunch to get those done, because it's always in the back of their mind. And so maybe it could be posted at the school somewhere, and hey, if you want to maintain this or help it stay, you can get community service hours by doing the few little upkeep things needed to help keep this here.
Okay. And then as far as location, so it's probably a good location, but I fear for big sporting events, football games, for example, you got lots of kids running around all the time. Is it going to, are they going to run onto it and scatter sand everywhere, or is it going to be cordoned off? How is that? Have any thought been put into that?
Well, I didn't have an idea of like a fenced-off area for it, but I was out there today, and the AMS track team had an event today, and as I was flagging it out, there was since the fence is right there before the track and the football field, there was no one really on it or bothering me when I was putting the stakes out there for it. So, is the potential there for it to be kicked around? And like you said, yes, the potential is there, but do I think it would be a huge problem to where it couldn't be put there? I don't think it would be that big of a problem.
Thanks, Nick.
When do you think this would be most likely used? Is it an organized activity from the Rec Commission, or is it pickup, or how do you expect it would be used?
Like, who would use it, or how it would be used? Or,
yeah.
So, I guess for who would use it, it could, like I said, open to the public. It could be school organizations or clubs. And then when it would be used, when I talked to Craig, and he said, yes, like we would definitely use something like this for a summer organization, like they have soccer teams, basketball teams. They could easily use it. And the volleyball team, like a few times during the girls' season, we went outside and we practiced on the soccer field just to get outside and have fun with it. But I mean, what's better than having your own volleyball court built at the school? So I could see it being used immensely.
So, just to follow that up, so some of this would be used during not school time, but during the school year, and then the Rec Commission would use the facility out of the school year in the summer primarily. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Might I make a comment? And there is a volleyball court that the school probably has access to at Jasper Valley Swim and Tennis Club. It's been there for a number of years. There is a lease that was written many, many years ago to allow the school to use those tennis courts during the school year. The lease could be extended to that volleyball court. It's a beach volleyball court. It's a regular sized beach volleyball. It's all laid out. It's got sand there. It's got grass around the edges and all that kind of thing. Had you had the opportunity to investigate that at all?
I did not talk to Jasper Valley at all, but I see it more during the school year uses. I don't see a lot of people going for like the drive, like, oh, there's a volleyball court at Jasper Valley, which is like, so you said that it was open for, is it like open to the lease? Is it open to the?
Well, it's not included in the lease because there was never a court there before. But I can't imagine that the club wouldn't care if it was used during the lease, because the tennis team is there and it's just another use of the club and use of their lease.
So the reason why I suggested it to be at the school is just because it's kind of an easier meeting ground, because you got the bean fields right there with everyone on them, and so it's kind of like just one step over instead of having to be in a whole separate location.
Nick, great job on the presentation. You put a lot of work into it. I think that given the fact there's some questions, we probably didn't realize we were going to ask to vote on 10 grand tonight.
Right.
We'll table voting on this until our next meeting on May 22nd, so we can talk about it. And I think Adam's going to ask Stephanie to work with Craig to get some details to put in front of us for the next meeting, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's totally fine with me. And I also do have a written proposal. It's all written out. I can share with Amy, and she can send it out to all of you, just so you have everything in front of you.
Okay, great. And I think Stephanie's will reach out to Nick as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So is the
Go ahead.
So is the idea that we would have that information ready for one of the next board meetings prior to Nick graduating, so that we can have an opportunity to vote on it?
I think in 3 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great.
The
And
22nd.
just to respond to your comment, David, I know that Jasper Valley has that volleyball court. I think that isn't really the idea of this proposal. I think, having the kids have to drive over probably doesn't work out very well, so.
My thought was that you could experiment with this process and experiment, see what kind of attendance you get, what kind of usage you get. If you use their court for some period of time and then you decide whether you want to go ahead and build one. It's always nice to have proof of concept before you go ahead with it. My only thought.
So just real quick, I know the volleyball coach is here. Would he be able to just make a couple comments?
Sure. Do you want to make some comments?
Probably won't be here at the next meeting.
Come on up.
Can you just tell a little bit about yourself?
Andy Gordon, Amherst resident. I live about a mile from the school. Started coaching volleyball at this school this year. And you do an excellent job here as far as having the school facilities available to the general public. I've been a resident here for 4 years. To see an open high school like this where we can come down and, because I live less than a mile away, I pass it 20, 30 times a day, especially on the weekends, running back and forth. And there's people out in the soccer fields, they're walking on the track, their families playing. This is the one thing you're missing. Jasper, as a coach, I wouldn't want it. For the kids to come outside once in a while and play, it's a different game. We have the gym, it's a different type of sport. So the outdoor area would be something for off-season, for them to play, for the public to play. As far as maintenance, I have one at my house. I built one at my house also. It's sand and a rake. It's pretty much the bulk of the maintenance. Occasionally you have to fix a net or replace a net. Once it's done, and if it's designed properly, and from what I've seen of Nick's design, it's designed properly, you don't have any real maintenance on it. It's keeping the grass from encroaching, and it's replacing the sand and raking it. That's pretty much the only maintenance you have on these things. And they get tremendous amounts of use. If the rec council's looking to use it for some of their programs, I don't know what they charge, $25, $50 a kid. They go out for 6 weeks, 1 night a week. There's some income. Hollis Brookline has 2 in their area, in one of the rec areas. 1 night a week is $5 for anybody from anywhere to come play. And they can have anywhere from 20 to 40 people there because they have court, plus they'll set up some grass courts. So there is potential to pay for itself over time, or at least pay for any cost on upkeep. The idea of the National Honor Society and the volunteers, because I get kids volunteering this year, I had 20 seniors approach me to manage the team because they're looking for hours. Much more here now. So that's always an opportunity. They're always looking for hours, so that's a great idea. But it really would fit in nicely here. It's a tremendous sport. It's a sport that can be used male, female, because it's across a net. It's not a contact sport. Mixed ages. There was a tournament this weekend. You had kids from 18 to guys in their 50s and 60s playing together. It's all about the skill level they're playing. So it's a tremendous sport for that. And it's all over the country. And having one at the school would also be a tremendous asset. Thank you.
Okay. I guess I should have any comments, any additional comments at all before we move on? Okay, thanks a lot, Nick. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.
Okay, we have another senior project presentation tonight, so I'm going to turn it over to Adam Steele for the introduction.
Thank you. So Kaylee Berry is here to present on her senior project. Kaylee, we should all be very proud, is going to NYU's Tisch School next year for, why am I blanking on?
Musical theater.
Musical theater, thank you, which getting into that program is the equivalent of getting into a D1 basketball team. It is incredibly difficult to get into and selective, and so Kaylee is really, really talented to be able to be in that program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kaylee, and I'll pull up your, there you go.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for having me tonight. I'm Kaylee Berry, and this is my senior project, and I entitle it In and Beyond the Classroom. So my essential question for my project is how can a community within a public high school best support, best establish, and best promote inclusivity and equality for students with developmental disabilities. The goal of my project is to establish a more inclusive environment for students with developmental disabilities in Souhegan High School and its community. So why this project and why Souhegan? To start off, I have a lot of personal experience involving students with developmental disabilities. For instance, my mother has worked with students with people with developmental disabilities for as long as I could remember, and I've always known how to interact with different types of people and treat different people. In addition to that, I volunteered with Gateways Community Services and Make-A-Wish Foundation and the Child Foundation. And why Souhegan? At Souhegan, personally, I've noticed a lot that students without developmental disabilities unintentionally exclude students with developmental disabilities for lack of education, lack of knowing how to communicate, and that's really it. There's no intentional exclusion. And I think this is really because it's not really taught in school. Interaction is never really discussed. It's definitely something we've been paired up with different students since I was little, but there's sometimes that awkward exchange, and not being educated in the very beginning stages of life, it can lead to bullying when we're little, and it's a tool that everyone will need their entire life. It's never something that would not be needed. And also, students at other programs, specifically I spoke with Joanne Curry from Malvern, who established the program We Are All the Same. This is just one of many programs, and I understand Souhegan has an extremely inclusive society here, and I'm so grateful for that. But they have a lot of other different programs, including Unified Sports and Special Education Wing and different types of socials throughout the year, different buddy programs, and obviously these wouldn't all fit Souhegan, but these are just some examples and some things to think about. So what are we striving for? Next, after this slide, I'll be presenting 5 different types of plans that Souhegan could adopt in different ways, obviously, but each plan is striving to encourage inclusion of all students just in the community as well. Adopt new learning opportunities, and it would serve as a safe place for all students, and provide information and understanding as a whole. So my first proposal is to begin the discussion. This would include educating students without developmental disabilities about students with developmental disabilities and how to interact with them. Like I said before, there's always seemed to be a lack between communication, not in every student, obviously not in every classroom, but it's definitely something I've noticed throughout all of my schooling, and even just regular exchanges in my personal life. Pairing students together with developmentally disabled students in classroom settings more regularly. I understand Souhegan does this a lot, just not everyone has the opportunity to do so, and I think that's really important. Another thing a lot of schools adopt, and I know Souhegan also has done this from time to time, but have professionals come in and speak about how to interact. Specifically, these are some organizations I know and just people. So Gateways Community Services, the Special Olympics does it often, community members, people who have their own experience, and then Best Buddies has a really good program that also does this. Next is starting a committee or a club. So this would consist of a small group of students and adult leaders that would facilitate different events and different policies for the club. So this would consist of a weekly, monthly, or yearly events planning. And there would be all different types of activities that would be accessible and attainable for all students and have a really big aspect of fun and inclusion. Obviously, to be successful, this would have to be at many different times, not just one time a week or one time a year, because as we all know, everyone is very busy, and we all need different types of times for different schedules. And to raise awareness for this is just very brief, but I'll get more into this later, through fundraising, and flyers, student community. Obviously, we have a lot of different people who want to participate in our community, and I think that would not be hard to do. So my next proposal is Step Up Day, another thing Souhegan does already, and I know other schools do this as well. So I think eventually, on the broad scheme of things, maybe 10 years, something like that, out to start a program similar to what I'm proposing tonight in the elementary and middle schools. Like I said before, I think a lot of our learning begins as we're young, and I think it's really important to know how to treat people from since you're born. And so for Step Up Day, I know a lot of students do this, assign designated students to help students with developmental disabilities learn about the school and the environment, because it's very intimidating even without developmental disabilities. And one thing huge about the transitional process for students with developmental disabilities is that it's more focused towards the academic aspect and not the social aspect, which is a huge component of being in high school and just schooling in general, as we all know. And I think this would really help bind that together. This is another thing that Souhegan definitely does, just allow school access over the summer and more encouraging that more, and including that, allowing more time for students with developmental disabilities to meet with teachers and students and just have a really good core group that would welcome them in a much less intimidating way. So next is teaming up with other schools. I realize at the moment, I believe we only have 9 people who are developmentally disabled in our program. So that would definitely smaller side. So to plan all these great big plans, we would definitely need a broader program, which a lot of schools do. A lot of schools team up with other schools to extend their resources and speak with students of different backgrounds and have an even more inclusive community involving a bunch of different schools, which many do, including Malvern. And it would broaden the Souhegan population and access to different resources, and eventually provide more funds. This is, I talked to the athletic department about this, unified sports. I changed my applied piece many times because I struggled to find one way that would include everyone, and I realized there isn't one way to do that, so that's why I came up with 5 different plans. So unified sports is something created by the Special Olympics, and it involves students with and without developmental disabilities to work together and ultimately support inclusion, as all my other proposals have been. The problem why this didn't pass at Souhegan, I know there was a lot of discussion about this, I think about 4 years ago, if I'm correct. There isn't, because the NHIAA defines it as someone whose IEP is expected to be finished by they're 21 years old. That doesn't qualify for all of the students at Souhegan or in the Souhegan community who are developmentally disabled. So that goes back to my other point of involving different schools to have access to programs that require more people, because the NHIAA requires to be a specific amount for each sport. So obviously not everyone's going to want to participate in every sport or event, so we need to make sure we have enough people to fund that. The next is funding and promotion. There's obviously fundraising, support from the community, support from other organizations, online promotion, and similar to other ways Souhegan supports different fundraisers. Fundraising, a lot of students do this, like for instance, the Polar Plunge is one really popular way to gain access to funds, support from community, support from outside organizations. Usually this comes from the NHIAA or Best Buddies or the Special Olympics, and they're very commonly known for giving out funds for that. Online promotion, everyone's on their phones these days, so I don't think it would be hard to get students involved. And then similar to other Souhegan fundraisers, for instance, Hope for Gus and the Run for Hope are both really successful events. So where do we start? This list comes from my adaptation of something that the Special Olympics put out about their unified sports, but I shrunk it down to a more Souhegan view and broadened it out so it's not specifically for unified sports. So one, determine a need in the school and community. So I think just speaking about it, realizing we have the students for it, realizing we have the support for it, reaching out to the community as I'm doing tonight, and that would continue as this project continues. Constructing a plan for whatever activity Souhegan would choose to adopt, gain support from the community, start the activity, and then sustain commitment. So just including a bunch of different students, making sure that the activities remain fun and accessible for everyone, and just allowing different times and different people will want to participate. Thank you. And this is just something I'm really passionate about since I was little. And as Mr. Steele said, I want to continue this as I go into my career into college. So. Any questions?
Great. Do we have any questions from the board for Kaylee?
I also have some brochures that I'll leave over here.
Maybe it's what questions do we have for Kaylee?
In the brochures, I also included contacts for the NHIAA. Mindy Pond, who is my outside expert, and she is the Senior Director of Family and Child Services at Gateways Community Services, and the New Hampshire contact for the Special Olympics.
Thank you, Keely. Excellent job.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I got it.
All right. Do you need this?
Yeah, either way. Thank you.
Thanks, Kaylee. Thanks for the brochure, too.
Great job.
Okay, next we have the Community Council Safety presentation. So, is that Mitchell and Daria? Okay, come on up. Okay. Oh, hi, Joanne. I didn't see you back there. Sorry.
Get up our.
Yeah, I was just going to ask.
Oh, really? If he switched on some wet tile.
Oh, no, you don't do that.
Well, he immediately answered that first question. How many times did Sam do that?
Go ahead.
Please.
So I'm Joanne McDeed, math teacher here at the high school and one of the co-advisors of council. I was just going to set the scene a little bit for the work that we did throughout this past year, and then I'm going to hand it over to Daria and Mitchell. I'm glad that Mitchell brought up that at our meeting on Monday, we had visitors from Attleboro, Mass. And they came to view our community council in action, and we actually met them at a conference that we presented at in Providence in March. It was one of our, how many snow days did we have, Adam?
Six.
However many.
Yeah, more than 5.
Right.
7. Yeah.
So we went.
So far. Yeah.
We went down to Providence for 2 days, and Monday was a half day. And at the end of that first session, there was a special session, kind of unfortunately, that was just for the students who were at the conference, and it was really for them to have a chance to talk to students from all over New England about what had just happened in Parkland. So it was students only. Adults weren't allowed. We had to wait out in the lobby, but it was great. So they got the chance to talk to each other, and unbeknownst to us, so I just found this out on Monday, the folks that were there from Attleboro, after they had talked with, so Melody Chen was one student we brought, and then we had 3 freshmen, Georgia Craven, Delaney Fox, and Molly Atkinson. So after they spoke with those 4 girls, they decided we definitely have to come back on Tuesday, the next day, to the conference because we have to go to their session. Then the snow happened, and school was canceled for them. It was canceled for us also, but we were already there. They're a neighboring town, pretty much, Attleboro. And because their school was canceled, they weren't allowed to go to the conference. So they were mortified because they wanted to come to our session. So they, I guess, went home and made all kinds of calls to their board to get a special approval for them to be able to travel back that night, Monday night, before the snow started, so that they could be in the hotel that the conference was being held at, so that they could go to our session. Awesome. So she had just told me that on Monday, and so then after that they decided they wanted to come and see us. So they happened to be there when we were at nominations for our new officers. And by the way, let me introduce our new moderator. So that was, so they got to see who our what our executive positions are like and all that. And then Adam was there, and we had a conversation about security and about, that we would be coming here tonight. And again, they joined in the conversation with us, and it was fantastic. We learned some things from them. They learned what it could look like to be in a meeting with, administration and students and teachers and school board members, all in one place, and superintendent, all in one place, coming together. So with all the conferences we went to and talking to other schools, my big takeaway is how important not just council is, obviously, I believe that, but just the communication and the working together of all of us together is key to everything that we do. And every school that we talk to doesn't believe that it works. So I want to prove them wrong, continue to prove them wrong. So, with that said, I'm going to transition now into the security. So we started this back in June-ish of last year when we first got together, gathered a group of volunteers from council that would come for many meetings over the summer. We had community members, staff, students, school board member on the committee. So we began by looking at what we already have in place. We looked at from our 2010 Community Council Security Review, we looked to see what progress had been made on that, and there was a lot of progress. So we were really happy to see that a lot of the recommendations that were made then were approved and followed up on, and we've made good progress. So in the report, they're listed on page 2. I don't know where you are. Okay. Then a large amount of work during the summer was research. So we had researched tons and tons of articles, all about school safety, security. Unfortunately, throughout the year, there's a lot more articles that came to light. And so there's a lot out there. Many of which we included at the end of the report. There's an addendum of a lot of the work that we looked at. One of the very first things we also did was looked at our own data. We, after that, had come to the board and shared out some of that, what we had already been looking at. We looked did our own survey in addition to looking at the data from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, incident reports, the Homeland Security report, what was the other one? Department of Labor report, thank you. And that's what kind of got us all kicked off. And then we developed a bunch of questions and reached out to some of our neighboring towns. I believe we shared that with you earlier in the year too. So we had conversations with Hollis Brookline and Milford and Bedford and Pinkerton, because Pinkerton had several buildings. Then, eventually, we stepped into phase 3, which was we came up with 25, I think, different recommendations within the committee. And then those all needed to be brought to the full council and had conversations, and then we voted on every single one. At first, it was a very different year for us because we didn't have a lot of proposals coming to us, so we were slowly, for a while, talking only security, and we were kind of out of form of how we ran our meetings. So we didn't have a proposal. We were creating our own recommendations, if that made any sense. So there were times that we extended our voting to in favor of, opposed, abstain, and then not yet. So we had a not yet category if we felt that there was more work that we needed to do as a committee, kind of outside of the big meeting, that we could gather information and bring it back. And then each of those got revised and then became part of our whole proposal. So I am going to turn it over to which one? Okay, to Daria, and she's going to step you through. We'll try to go quickly because you have the report. So they're going to go through each of the recommendations pretty quickly, point out a few key things, and then I'll come back in at the end.
So to begin, I guess I can quickly go through, just read off our 5 sub-EQs that we focused on throughout our comprehensive security review. So our first sub-EQ was how do we secure the perimeter while maintaining an open and vibrant campus, because something that was really important to us was updating the security while keeping the Souhegan culture that really sets us apart from other schools. Our next was what is the best lockdown or evacuation solution for Souhegan? How do we keep valuables safe? How do we keep each other safe? And how do we maintain to enhance a culture of respect, trust, and empowerment, as I stated before? So the first one we're going to talk a little bit about is one you all probably know. It was to hire a nonprofit safety and security assessment company to help assess the needs. Because while Community Council was doing their own research, we also wanted to go and get maybe an expert or an unbiased organization who really knows this field to come look at our school. It was really important for us to find an organization that wasn't just like trying to sell us their security equipment, which is why I believe we had 2 organizations look at the school. As you all know, we ended up with Souhegan because we, from really researching it, had found that they were a company that valued keeping the culture of the school, which was, as I stated, very important to us. So we did Souhegan, and I believe Adam's going to mention that a little later in the meeting, or what was in that report. The only real concern that council had with this was what group was going to do it, because everybody was in favor of this happening as an action. So it was pretty unanimous. There was just 1 abstention, 0 opposed in this, and we ended up hiring that nonprofit safety and security organization. Next, our next recommendation was adult and student expectations. So I guess students and adults, or maybe everybody is at a heightened state of fear, I guess, at this stage with so many different shootings and atrocities occurring. So we really wanted to focus on educating the school community. So we came up with adult and student expectations. So we talked about things like see something, say something. We talked about maybe addressing a lot of these things during freshman and senior day and providing training to advisors and staff over the summer, which could maybe be relayed at the freshman senior day. We do more with advisories, though a main part of this was targeting through advisories, but we will talk about that even a little bit more later. Again, this was something that people wanted because people want to know what to do when something bad happens. So the council was pretty in favor of this. Though we talked a little bit about, it was originally voted not yet because we needed to work out some of the logistics, but then we did vote 29 in favor, and 0, it was unanimous, so people were pretty in favor of this one. Next, I'm going to talk about community-wide focus on personalization. So this one was really about culture and refocusing on advisory. We felt that the thought behind advisory had kind of gone away, and we wanted to refocus on that being somewhere where students can feel safe and have someone to talk to if they see something. In addition, we thought that class sizes above 20, especially in science classes, because I know my chemistry class this year was very large, it's just really not safe, especially if a lockdown or something like that happens, because a lot of the classrooms are very small. There's just not somewhere you can go in that situation if there's 30 kids in a chem lab. And it would be hard. So also we felt that with smaller classes, students would feel like they're in a safer environment and they could maybe report something and they'd maybe feel closer with both their peers and their teachers. Also, this one we really wanted to refocus on the culture. We were talking to some community members and they said, oh, well, when my kids, they're in their 30s, they can still recite the Souhegan 6. I don't think I could do that, and I'm a current Souhegan member. I don't think my brother who graduated last year could do that. So we want to maybe return to our roots as a school and what kind of originally our foundation, and go back to that and work on teaching the kids that, but not just like the phrases, really go beyond that and helping each student embody what Souhegan really means. And then finally, engage the community in what we can do together. No matter what we voted on in council, none of that really would become possible without working with the community. When it comes down to it, Amherst as a town needs to be committed to the safety of the school, not just the students and not just the staff. So that's why we thought that maybe bringing them in more on what we're doing, it would be really important and it would help us be a safer school. So next, education and training for staff and students. So this kind of goes along with the one I mentioned earlier about see something, say something and stuff like that, and train what you're supposed to do when maybe you see someone who's looking a little odd. But also this had to do with first aid and CPR, because what if one of your peers gets shot and you're in this classroom and there's a shooter walking around and you can't get out to someone like an EMT or something like that? Well, it's important for everybody to know what basic first aid in those situations. As you can see in comments, one student mentioned that they took health on VLAX in order to take more classes in their sophomore year, and in VLAX you couldn't pass health class without becoming CPR and first aid certified, which I thought was very interesting, and so did the council, and we thought maybe that's something that we could add to our curriculum. In addition, so as you can see, the vote for this one, again, was almost completely in favor. There was 1 opposed and 2 abstentions. But when it comes down to it, both staff especially and students as well felt this was extremely important. So next, I'm going to move on to number 5, which was to recognize the importance of the campus monitor. I guess kids don't always realize how unique it is that we have someone out in our school patrolling it all the time, and that's another barrier we have to an intruder coming in. So maybe just in seeing how important a role it is and how imperative it is to our school's safety, and kind of just returning to that, because a lot of students just see that as the person keeping them from leaving campus or something. So kind of recognizing that role. And this was, again, this was unanimous.
If I can add something to that too. I think another focus of this aspect of the proposal was to make this known as another place where you could go to report something if you saw someone who seemed off, I guess, or just in case you didn't feel safe on the campus. This is an important resource, and we wanted to make sure that in the future, if our campus monitor retires or leaves their job, that we make sure that we reinstate another campus monitor.
Yes, and in addition, this was one that we voted on very quickly. I believe we only talked about it for about a day because everybody felt so strongly about this and keeping this as a position at Souhegan for years to come, as Mitchell was stating. And then we're going to move on to number 6, which was to commit to an annual safety and security check-in. Because Souhegan went about 10 years without going through one of these, there was a lot to do. We had to do a lot. There was a lot of legwork that needed to be done. We were looking at things that were 10 years old. And it just wasn't healthy for the Souhegan climate to have gone this long without going through a safety and security review. So something that important about this recommendation was Article X, and I'm just going to read that. It was the school board representatives shall also be in contact biannually with the dean of students and emergency management team in order to update council on security. The school board representative, our representative on council, as Mitchell is this year, will collaborate with these individuals and groups in order to ensure all voices are included in security discussions. In the event of the security review, the school board representative will be included in the process. Because we thought it was really important that no matter what happens with security in Souhegan's future, a student should always be included as they're almost a stakeholder in the school, and they're a person that's being directly affected by all the decisions made here. Next, we're going to move on to number 7, which was to involve students and staff in developing improved lockdown and fire drill procedures. So students feel very, very strongly about the procedures that we have, especially when they're lacking or when they may not be. So a big part of this one was that students and staff have a voice on the emergency management team, as nobody really, I think, a lot of people weren't aware of it on council, or students definitely weren't. In addition, it was to enhance protocols for practice fire drills and lockdown procedures, because a lot of students feel that, especially our lockdown procedures, could be lacking, and they want to be included in changing that, as they're the ones going through these procedures. They're the ones who've been affected by this since the 1st grade, and they kind of know how they run. So that one was, that was number 7. And that one, it was another one that we voted on very quickly. As you can see, this was also unanimous, so we did feel very strongly about this. Finally, I'm going to discuss visitor protocol. So we felt that there should be some kind of protocol for when a visitor comes in, as so far all we have is really like you go up to Linda and you sign in. We felt that there should be some sort of identification that this is a visitor, this is someone who's not usually in the school. In addition, as you'll hear about later, we said a buzz-in system may be required at the vendor entrances. We did also vote on a buzz-in system that Mitchell's going to discuss a little later, to kind of go along with identifying the visitors. And also, it's just to make sure that nobody that would harm the safety of Souhegan, or we wouldn't want in Souhegan to come in here, as that wouldn't be very good. So as you can see, 21 voted in favor, though 5 voted not yet. The majority, as you can see, felt that this was ready to be presented and that this was very important. And as you can see in comments, somebody said basically we don't want unidentifiable people walking around campus. That's really the main concern of this. Both students, staff, and community members were worried about it. Now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Mitchell to present the rest of the recommendations.
So next we're going to talk about visitor parking separate from staff and student parking. Basically what this is about is making sure that, so right now a lot of visitors don't have a designated place to park out by the flagpole entrance. A lot of that is taken up by staff, and so a lot of visitors are going back towards the annex, and also there isn't really any parking that really lets people know that where the main entrance is, where they're supposed to go. So we want to make sure that that visitors have a designated place to go that directs them towards our visitor center and keeps everyone safe. One of the ideas that we threw around was changing the parking lot by the flagpole to a visitor parking area, so that all staff would be moved to the parking near the annex, and we would have that as a just a place for all the visitors to go, and then we could have signage pointing them towards the main entrance. And then, of course, our school monitor would make sure that only student and staff vehicles are going past the bus loop during school hours, so that we don't have a case of injury there. And we just thought that our current situation was not ideal for making sure that we know where all our visitors are and that everyone is coming past Linda or someone who will notice that maybe they're acting strangely. We also are recommending a bank teller style buzzing system for our visitor entrance. That would be downstairs, right down there across from where Linda is. We were thinking that it would be connected to the door so that if you're familiar with how the buzzing system is at AMS, they have a first door that you can enter through, and then the people in the main desk have a buzz-in, so when they see that you're waiting, they can buzz you in. And it allows for the vetting of visitors and making sure that Linda sees everyone who's entering the school. So basically this will provide a more secure system to monitor and vet visitors. And we were sort of mixed on this one because of the high cost potentially, depending on where we decided to put that. If we wanted to knock down a wall perhaps so that it's between the two doors that are in the main entrance. But in general, we were in favor of this proposal. We also wanted to include a safety app that would be either an anonymous tip line or just sort of a resource for social and emotional and mental health so that students don't feel like they have to schedule an appointment with guidance or make it really official. They can just sort of have that place to go to. We talked about this app called Safe Schools, which allows people to say something through the device, and it's really important that it's anonymous because we don't want students to feel like everything that they're going to be tracked down because they are feeling depressed or something like that. We want to make sure that it's still a safe space for students. We also discussed 3M security film, which is one of the things that they have implemented at the middle school. If you go to the middle school, you'll notice that the windows along the front entrance are darker, and that's what we believe that's what they have there. Basically, it stops people from breaking through the glass, and it holds it in place so that if someone did break the glass, they wouldn't be able to just push through. This would most likely go if we did implement a visitor center or the buzzing system, the bank teller buzzing system. It would go along there so that if Linda deemed a visitor unsafe, they wouldn't be able to just break through anyways. And we were highly in favor of this because we thought it was just one of those things where if we can do it, why wouldn't we? It greatly improves the safety of our school. We also talked about audible exterior door alarms, which would essentially work, or the way that we thought that they would work, was that if an exterior door was propped open for an extended period of time, it would start beeping or making some sort of noise so that either the person that opened the door or propped the door open would know that they're not supposed to do that, or someone nearby could close it because in the event of a lockdown, if a door is not closed completely, the automatic locks within it can't function. Additionally, if a door to the exterior is left open, then we don't really have control of who enters through that door. And we were highly in favor of this one. I believe that this is one that we revisited during our process a couple times because there were just a lot of discussion about it and whether or not this would interfere with the culture of Souhegan. The next thing was something that you guys talked a lot about in your discussions here, was the improvement of exterior lighting, because in the parking lots especially, students who are here late at night sometimes don't feel safe walking to their cars, and we just want to make sure that people, whether or not something actually happens, we want to make sure everyone feels safe on Souhegan's campus. We were, I don't believe we have a vote for that. It was just unanimous. That was when we had a larger meeting, so we couldn't count it. But the comments were really just that it's a major safety concern for our students, and this is also a part of our facility updates from the Souhegan 2.0 plan. The next idea that we had was, it's sort of an interesting concept, is the installment of concrete barriers near the entrances to the school, because one of the things that's happened a lot in Europe especially is people driving cars through crowds as an act of terrorism, and it's a really scary thing to think about, but we want to make sure that people can't bring large vehicles into places that they can't drive them into the school. And one of the main places that we were considering this was between the annex and the main building, because there are students walking through there, and we wouldn't want anyone to be able to drive through there or and hit a student, injure a student in any way. And this one was very much in favor because it doesn't really seem to have much of an impact on the culture of Souhegan. If anything, it just makes it prettier because we put plants in them. So we thought that this was definitely something that we should include. The next thing we talked about was our SRO and the location of the SRO's office, because currently it is in it's sort of out of the way and doesn't have very good visibility outside of the office. And we know that the SRO can't always be around the halls looking at things, so sometimes he does need to be, or she needs to be in their office because they have stuff to do. And we want to make sure that the SRO has visibility outside of their office so that they can see if there's something wrong. So we talked about either potentially making improvements to the current SRO office near the pit downstairs, or moving the SRO to a more favorable location. A lot of the site visit that we did, we walked around and we looked at the SRO's office, and we just thought that it didn't really seem like the best possible solution. And like it says in the comments, it is imperative that the SRO be a visible presence in the school. So the next, part 17 was pretty big. It's our facility maintenance Souhegan 2.0 plan. We recommend that the following building safety concerns are addressed by the ongoing Souhegan 2.0 initiative. We wanted to update existing folding walls because a lot of them are in various stages of disrepair. Some of them can't close completely, or they're missing gaps. They have gaps or things like that. And in the event of a lockdown especially, if there's a room that is left open and that has a folding wall to another classroom that has students in it, a lot of the folding walls right now don't have like a locking system or something that can keep that wall from being pushed in. We also wanted to address the interconnecting locked classroom doors and potentially add auto locks like we have on the doors into the hallways, because a lot of those don't have a way to lock currently, and in the event of a lockdown, it's important that we don't give an intruder any more accessibility than we need to have, than they have with things just not functioning properly or open doors. We also wanted to update the existing classroom door locks because they have a habit of not locking or just being. I know sometimes teachers can't get into their rooms in the morning because the locks aren't functioning. I've had that happen a couple times this year, and we don't really know if it's something wrong with the current lock system, or if we just need to make sure that they're maintained better, but we want to make sure that those are updated. And then we also want to update our lockdown drills because a lot of students don't know what to do if they're in a public area or if they're in the cafeteria, because we schedule all of our lockdowns during class times, and that's not necessarily realistic. We need students to be aware of what's happening or what to do at any point during the day. And then also we wanted to improve locker storage because there haven't been many cases of theft in Souhegan, but band students have expressed concern for leaving their bags and their instruments out in the hallway because the yearbook room that they use for their instruments is quite small. And also for the mini gym, there are classes that use that, and they are forced to leave their bags in the hallway, which isn't the most safe place for them because visibility out of the mini gym and into the hallway is not great. And this was we were largely in favor of this because it's just a lot of updates that students generally feel need to happen to the school because we feel that we're falling behind on those things. The next part and the final part of our recommendation is our position on security cameras. So this is, I'm just going to read this part because it's our position and it is pretty well laid out here. So as a part of our comprehensive review of security and safety at Souhegan, Community Council has carefully considered whether the addition of video surveillance cameras would be beneficial to Souhegan. We've been given this role as the governing body of Souhegan under the authority of the school board as well as through the board policy, which states that Community Council should be consulted when determining the location of cameras on Souhegan's campus. Based on the extensive research of the 2017 to 2018 Security Committee, a survey of faculty and staff regarding safety and security at Souhegan, lengthy discussions at Community Council meetings and with our constituents, and an acknowledgement of the culture of trust that has been a cornerstone at Souhegan, we are recommending the following to the Souhegan School Board. Exterior video cameras may be installed as a tool to provide improved monitoring and access control of our campus. The number and location of exterior cameras is to be determined in consultation with Community Council. In general, Community Council is not in favor of the installation of interior cameras. However, we are open to discussing the possibility of interior cameras in certain locations on a case-by-case basis in consultation with Community Council as well. So we just really want to make sure that we aren't putting in cameras where they don't need to be, because it's really important to the people, to Community Council, that we don't feel like we're imposing anything too constrictive onto Souhegan's culture. We want to show that we still trust students. We just want to make sure that we're covering all of our options. We also want to make sure that viewing video cameras in live mode needs to be limited and only used under carefully prescribed instances, because live surveillance is not the primary purpose of the video cameras that we would have in Souhegan. And finally, Community Council wants to reserve the right to revisit this position in the future, because in the event that we feel that cameras are no longer necessary or that we don't need cameras, or we want to have more cameras depending on what happens in the future, we want to make sure that our options are open for this. And we were sort of split on this because, of course, cameras would be a very large change to Souhegan's culture, and it was a pretty extensive discussion that we wanted to make sure that we were covering every possible outcome. And we also have some comments from students about safety at Souhegan that we have at the end here that I think are just really interesting to read, because it shows that Souhegan has a very welcoming environment, but students, because of the things happening in our country right now, students are going to feel unsafe no matter. I guess we need to make sure that students are feeling heard and not just what we have on council, and we want to make sure that things keep happening, because we want to make sure that Souhegan stays up to date with our security reviews in the future.
Okay, so I'm just going to wrap it up, and then we'll open it up to questions for you guys. I think, so that was a lot, and a lot of it you've already heard from us. And when Adam came to council on Monday and shared some of the things from Safe Havens, I think a lot of what council has talked about and is recommending is pretty much in line with what Safe Havens is as well. I think no matter what ends up happening, for us, the important things I think are is that all of our voices are heard, and that whatever plan is in place, it's not jumped into, but we spread out over time. We think about the phase-in of improvements to our security, and I think that we do have a lot of good things in place here at Souhegan, and one of which Daria and Mitchell talked about is in our advisory program. But I do think that we can make some improvements in terms of helping kids with social emotional learning. And so the investments that we make, I think there are physical investments, but there's also the emotional supports and investments that we need to make too. So that, I guess, is our plea to you as we move forward. Okay. And thank you to folks who are on the committee, several in the audience right now, if you want to stand up. They don't want to stand up. Okay. Right. So, I want to thank you for your work.
Okay.
Well done.
Thank you, Joanne. thanks Daria and Mitchell and everybody else associated with putting the plan together. I'm going to turn it over to Adam here in a second, but this is the first time I've heard you present, Daria. Mitchell, we've heard you all year, so that's great, but Community Council's in great hands with you guys next year. You did a fantastic job. Thank you very much. And Joanne, I know you've worked real hard on this, advising them, so thank you, and to Jeannie and Mary Ellen and Mary Lou, rather, and everybody else on the Community Council that's been involved, so thank you. I guess the next place we're going to go is, questions or will there be a presentation? Yeah. So if it's okay with the board, hopefully we've been taking notes on the Community Council presentation, because we're going to let Adam go to his presentation, and then at the end we will all ask questions of both bodies. Is that okay with everyone? I know it's kind of a lot to sit through and listen and remember, but it's probably the best way to handle it since it's so much information. So, Adam?
Thank you. So I actually pre-recorded my presentation so I can share it online as well with folks so they can see and have the information available to them. So I'll just play that in a minute, but I want to highlight a couple of things first. Hearing from Community Council, you can tell the thoughtful process that they went through, and it truly was. They had to synthesize information from tons of different sources, the opinions from all over the place, from a very wide spectrum throughout the school community, and they did a tremendous job making that happen. I want to make clear from the beginning that the report from Safe Havens International is not a public document, nor is it going to be a public document. We are not going to provide the opportunity for folks to understand exactly what our vulnerabilities are and how we're going to address those. That's just not something we're going to do. And so that might be frustrating for some, but that's clearly the best thing. I mentioned in my presentation, you'll hear in a minute, but Sandy Hook, there was evidence that the bad actor in that case spent 7 years planning that attack, that person was able to get a hold of the state police manual on active shooter response and use that against the police responding, and also had the school's emergency operations manual available to him that he then used in that attack. So we have to be very careful in describing all of these, both vulnerabilities that we have and also the steps that we're going to take, that we don't provide a blueprint for someone who has bad intentions against our school system. So, and then the three key points here is that I happened to be at a school where President Obama came for a presidential campaign visit. And I had to work with the Secret Service and the campaign to prepare for that visit. So I have a pretty good sense of what it takes to make a secure safe and secure. And I want to tell you that's not something that we're prepared to do at that scale. What we need to do is create a culture of safety that with a reasonable amount of effort, we can make sure that we're doing the very best we can for our students, but it's going to come from our culture. It's not going to come from the devices and the technology and the tools that we put into place primarily. We heard from advisory was mentioned, and a lot of us feel strongly that advisory is a place where that culture can be sown, and eventually we can start seeing the fruits of that labor. So with that, I'm going to play my video and maybe leave so I don't have to watch my own self speak. So here we go.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Steele, Associate Superintendent for SAE number 39. I'll be taking over as superintendent on July 1st, and I've decided to record my presentation regarding security at Souhegan High School to make sure that my presentation is accessible for folks who didn't make this board meeting tonight, or for in the future is something that we can refer back to. For me, security in school, my perspective changed going back to 1999 in April with what happened in Columbine. As a younger person, I never thought through the risks associated with a school setting, and that day forever changed my perspective. I remember that because I just been speaking to a student yesterday at Souhegan. This student mentioned how her perspective was changed a few months ago with what happened in Parkland in Florida. A couple of my cousins attended that school and can relate to what happened there and what happened in that school. And so for all of us, as the world has changed, so too must our schools. And I'm sure that even the folks that founded Souhegan High School would tell us if they could today that we need to be thinking about school in a different way and how we secure our schools. And so tonight is Council, the school board, the administration, and through hiring Safe Havens International out of Georgia. Safe Havens is a company that's been all over the country, working as a nonprofit to help schools make good choices when it comes to security. In fact, they've been called in on several incidents after the fact that help schools address security, including places that many of us have heard about in the news. They've done a good job coming here, understanding our culture, and making good recommendations for us on how we move forward. What we need to do at Souhegan High School is improve safety and security while enhancing the culture of the building and not taking away from it. What I mean by that is the culture at Souhegan is very important to all of us. And we don't want to change the look and feel of the building to the point where we take away from who we are as a school. Instead, we want to build a culture of safety and a culture of security in our school. Souhegan's built on a culture of respect, trust, and courage, and on 6 key values that define what we do in the school. Yet I want to read a quote from Safe Havens International. These values and core principles alone will not protect Souhegan High School students and staff from the threats that affect every school in the nation. What is needed is a true culture of safety, extending rather than compromising Souhegan High School's values and principles. Such a true culture of safety should be built on the following 7 prime objectives. Number 1, continuously improving safety, security, and emergency management. Number 2, recognizing and resolving all concerns affecting the safety and well-being of stakeholders. Number 3, ensuring staff competence in any emergency. Number 4, reinforcing a sense of safeness and well-being throughout the site and building design elements. Number 5, enforcing access to and from defined public, shared, and private zones. Number 6, enhancing situational awareness and emergency communications. And 7, hardening critical building elements that cannot be protected by other means. For schools to be successful, they have to feel inherently safe for parents to send their kids to school, for staff to teach students, and ultimately for students. A lot of what we do as educators is unlock the barriers to learning for our students, to get them into a place emotionally, socially, mentally, where they are available for learning. Put simply, a student who feels unsafe is not going to learn effectively. One of our responsibilities as a school system is to strike the balance between safety and culture, between thorough preparation while not instilling anxiety about what could happen, and between appropriate investment in physical safety without creating fortification unnecessarily. So looking through the Safe Havens report, what we were provided was a 55-page, very thorough and exhaustive plan that described not only areas that were doing well, but areas of deficiency and how to address those things. It should be noted that several mass casualty incidents in schools have involved pre-planning on behalf of bad actors, people who had researched and planned out attacks against schools by getting a hold of their plans and using those plans against them. For example, it may not be widely known, but in Sandy Hook, I'm told that the bad actor there used about 7 years of planning to prepare for that attack, used the state's own manual about how to respond to active shooter situations, and also the school's emergency operations plan against them in carrying out that attack. So we have to be careful that we don't disclose not only all of our perceived vulnerabilities, but sometimes even the direct steps we're going to take to address those. And so our plan is to share as much as we can with the public, but also to make sure that we're not giving a potential bad actor a blueprint about things to take advantage of or exploit in our school system. So here are some of the things we are going to do. I'm immediately going to be directing both Rob and Kelly to develop a threat assessment and management process, where when threats are identified or when concerns are brought forward by stakeholders, there's a process to resolve those things in a way where things don't slip through the cracks and where legitimate concerns are given the attention that they're due. Next, I'm going to direct Porter Dodge as our incoming Director of Operations to take over the responsibility of coordinating the steps outlined in the Safe Havens report, starting July 1st from a facilities, procurement, and training perspective. This is right in Porter's wheelhouse, and he's going to do a great job for us, ensuring that we follow up and take all the steps in order the way that they need to be carried out. Next, we're immediately going to issue an RFP to procure the necessary technology items and ask the board for authorization to move forward with the expenditure associated with them. Here are some of those things. We need an updated radio system that can tie all of our schools and the SAU together, along with interfaces for the police and fire departments in our two towns. And that's going to require some investment in the radio infrastructure at Souhegan High School. Next, we're going to move forward with a tip reporting tool that can be an app installed on phones that students and staff have access to both anonymously and directly report threats or potential concerns that we might have. Next, we're going to move our communication platform from OneCall Now to Mixel. Mixel is a communications platform that allows users to manage their own alerts and decide what kind of alerts they want to have, what they want to receive, and which ones they don't. That's going to extend for us great capability and our ability to communicate with folks both during an emergency situation and afterwards. Next, we need to purchase and have a centralized technology solution that unifies all of the things that will be used for surveillance and various technology tools within the building. For example, all of our door locks need to be connected to the same system that can initiate an emergency response in our building, notify the police department, and or be used in carrying out a lockdown drill. Those systems exist today and have come a long way in unifying different sensors and systems that we have, and we need to build that infrastructure right away before anything else can take place in the schools. And we also need to improve our exterior lighting. Our lighting needs to be improved outside to make it feel more safe. All of those things have some costs associated with them, and we're looking for the board to approve those expenditures right away. The next thing we need to do is prepare a migration of the 7 emergency response actions approved at the state level and update our lockdown procedures to be rolled out over the summer and into the next school year. Something I've heard from staff in particular is the desire to have a very clearly articulated lockdown plan that maybe is a little different from the traditional lockdown plan. And we need to roll that out over the summer and into this next school year. The final thing I want to mention about what needs to happen right away is school board policy indicates that the superintendent is responsible for the placement of cameras both outside and inside the building after consultation with the school board and community council. And so I'm going to ask the community council to give me their best advice about the locations of cameras, where they think that cameras should be both outside and inside the building, and also the school board for that guidance. But I want to be clear that I'm not going to disclose when we plan to install cameras on the site, nor where they're going to be installed. For the same reasons I illustrated earlier, we don't want to give a blueprint of our vulnerabilities or potential plan regarding that space. But I can tell you that cameras are coming to Souhegan High School, both outside the building and inside the building. We need them for a variety of reasons, and I'm convinced, even more so after the events over the last few months, that it's a necessary thing that will not take away from the culture of the school. So by next year, at this time, we should have the following 8 things done. We should know our 7 emergency response actions and drill each of them. We should have a radio system in place that connects us to all of our schools and the various life safety agencies. We should have a system in place that coordinates our technology, including the beginning of video surveillance in our high school. We should have a threat assessment and management process that allows students, staff, and parents to report threats. We should have improved exterior lighting and site issues as identified in the plan should be upgraded. We should have an updated lockdown procedure in place. We should have a plan in place for the following 2 years to improve our drills, improve our training, and to improve reporting, etc. And by next year, this time, you can be rest assured that we'll be in the implementation phase regarding video surveillance. So I know that not everything that I've talked about is going to be greeted with complete agreement from all sides. However, I feel strongly that it's the superintendent's responsibility to carry out processes and procedures that secure our campus and secure our school. And while I've been tremendously impressed by the work of Kelly Driscoll in being the point person on this project, Porter Dodge in providing his input, even though he's not officially on board at the SAB level yet, and Rob in providing his guidance throughout this process. I want to really call attention to the community council. Those folks have spent a year developing, discussing, debating, researching, and writing their plans and recommendations for us as we move forward. And as you've already heard from them tonight, and if you think about it, their recommendations all align with things that exist inside the Safe Havens report. There's one area of disagreement, and that's interior video cameras. But everything else, we're in complete agreement. And those folks on community council, and specifically the security subcommittee, should be applauded for their work because they've done a tremendous job understanding and advocating both for the culture of the school and for the right steps forward to make sure that we do what we need to do to secure our campus. So tonight, what I'm bringing forward, both to the board and to the public, is a plan for us to move forward and develop a extremely safe and safety-focused school where students feel safe, teachers feel safe, and parents feel comfortable sending their kids to our school. We're going to do what it takes. We're going to improve and become the best we can be regarding school safety. All of that within the culture of building our sense of culture drives safety, and safety comes from our culture. So with that, I look forward to anyone from the community who has questions or input for me as we move forward to provide that to me via email or by giving me a phone call. I'd be glad to make the publicly available portions of the report available to anyone who requests those by giving me a call or shooting me an email. And I really thank the community and the school board for bringing this issue to our focus. It really is going to be a focus of our attention over the next year. I'm looking forward to reporting back over the next several months about how we've improved and made a difference in our school, all while extending our culture and not taking away from it. Thank you very much for your time and your attention this evening.
Okay.
Let me get on my,
Yeah.
For non-public?
It was a great trip, I'll tell you that.
Procedural item. While that was happening, I heard Dwayne call in. So, Dwayne, are you with us right now?
I am.
Okay. I forget what the questions are, but are you alone?
I am.
Yeah, and was it unreasonable for you to attend tonight, extenuating circumstances?
That is correct.
Okay. I should just let Adam ask the questions. Go ahead.
Dwayne, were you able to listen to all of the conversation regarding this topic? You're not supposed to participate in a vote if you weren't able to hear the entire presentation.
Right, I did.
Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. Now, having said that, that was a lot of information to process. We were here for quite a long time. So we're just going to open it up for discussion for either the community council or for Adam or for both. Where do we start? Tim.
All right. Yeah, I just want to make a statement, as Adam mentioned in his presentation, video presentation, that the community council recommendations, before I heard what Adam said, and I compared them to the Safe Havens report, were fairly close to lock and step. Right? And then, as Adam reiterated in his presentation, with the possible exception of the surveillance, which we'll obviously have some other discussion about. So, unless somebody else has some concerns about any of these other recommendations, I say we go right to the controversial one.
I have one question myself, actually. I don't know if it's for Joanne or whoever, but the question I have is, when I looked at the community council report and the Safe Havens report, it really was astonishing that the two reports were so closely aligned. Like, some of the recommendations were just really close. Yep. So that the only difference is that one of your recommendations at the beginning was to go to an outside agency to have them do this assessment, and I'm wondering if it would have been you think it was worth it to go through the process? Because, in other words, would it have been better to wait for safe havens and then gone through it and then to vote on those things versus build it from scratch? Or do you think you got, did you get something out of that, I guess, is the question. And it might be Daria or Mitchell want to chime in too, or? Yeah. You understand what I'm asking you?
Yes, I
Okay.
do. Well, it was very important for council to get their word in. We weren't necessarily, though we wanted the input of an expert, council was really invested in doing this themselves. And as you can see, that's why there was the discrepancy with the cameras. We've been working on that for a while. We truly believed, as council, as members of the school, that we didn't want those things. So we weren't just looking for an expert because we also wanted to see how the students felt and what we could find. So, you guys have anything else to? So I guess that's really why we went for it.
Thank you. Joanne?
I think a lot of what council discussed and what was seen in Safe Havens is just kind of common sense stuff. So I think that's why there's some alignment there. But also, we gave them a copy of our report.
Dun, dun, dun.
Well, yeah, I want to add a comment to that. You heard two separate reports tonight, but really we've been working together for months on this together. We've spent a significant amount of time working together. In fact, it was Community Council that brought Safe Havens forward as a recommended vendor. I'd never even heard of them before. So it's no surprise that we landed in almost the exact same spot because we've been meeting together, working together, communicating with one another. So it's been a very collaborative process.
Yeah, and Jim, I would say, just to echo what Daria said, I think going through the process, while at times it felt painful, probably everyone would agree, and it took over council's meetings, I think the students are, and the other council members are very invested in the safety and security of Souhegan High School. So going through the process, I think, was just as important as the outcome.
Great. Any other questions? Right.
Another comment is that you've got us in-house. We can't go to Safe Haven every time we have a question or a problem. We've developed enough expertise now over the last 10.5 months that I think if the school board or the community or the students have questions, that the residue of information that we've garnered over the last almost year is now here and available to us. And I also think our report's going to be very useful, not just to us and to the school board, but to schools all around the area and country that haven't yet gone through the in-depth process that we have. And I think this will be of great service to them as well.
Thank you, Rick. Anyone else? Questions for either group? Steve.
So Adam said he wants to do some stuff. I got money questions.
Can I provide some?
Perhaps you have money answers.
I do. So back to December 7th, this board directed me to bring a security report, comprehensive security report by May 1st. I'm 2 days late, but I hope you'll forgive me for that. But at the time in December, the board said we want this report in May because we want to look at our unassigned fund balance in May and decide whether or not we want to expend funds right away on moving forward with security-related items. So you heard in my presentation that there were some things we said we want to get on right away with your blessing and approval. The unassigned fund balance right now is about $500,000. That gives you a frame of reference. And what I would be asking for is between $200,000 and $300,000 to get us started. You as a board need to determine what amount of money you feel comfortable expending from that line. And we will prioritize and go in the right order. Safe Havens is working on an RFP for us for some of these items so that we're ready to go and get working. What would likely happen is if the board was approved a dollar amount tonight, we would move forward and get competitive quotes and before the next board meeting in June so that we could be under contract in June to start moving forward. We don't need to have everything done by June 30th. We would need to have a contract in place by June 30th with whoever would be doing the work to successfully encumber the funds from this fiscal year. But moving forward, that's not everything that needs to be done. There's going to be other things down the road that need to be budgeted and expended in the future, up to and including physical changes to some walls, entrances, doors, et cetera, that are six-figure sorts of things that we would wrap into the Souhegan 2.0 project. We're going to have an architect, engineers, et cetera, looking at this building anyway. The most cost-effective way to make changes to the building would be to wrap that in, exactly as Mitchell described as part of their presentation.
Steve has a follow-up, and then Howard.
Okay, all of a sudden my accounting mind has kicked in for no good reason. So in the past, when we've had unassigned fund balances, sort of the general guideline that the board has used for itself is use roughly half of it for stuff that has come up that was not anticipated in budgets or whatever, and give the other half roughly to taxpayers. So you're thinking of 200 to 300 out of 500 is kind of in line with that historical practice. I recall we also had this unexpected boiler issue, and is that 500 before or after that's been paid for?
Net of that.
Net of that. So it's real. Okay, good.
Howard.
Now the priorities. A lot of times we'll take them in order that we can get something done, a larger project cost. Do we have that all set out, what you want to do?
Yes, I have it loosely defined. I kind of was going to wait for you folks to give a dollar amount, and then we would work to figure out the most important things that we could do and what we could get done. Plus, we also don't have any bids or quotes back for a lot of these things, which might tell us, oh, we actually do more or less than what we thought with the amount. So we're in the ballpark phase right now on that.
David.
Steve pointed out that we had the boiler. This is not including the boiler. The fund balance, the $500,000 is not including that, correct?
The boiler's already been accounted for, and still we have $500,000.
But was it accounted for out of the capital? No, okay. The second question I have is we're anticipating spending $22,000 on the math study, right? And I thought we had approved a couple of other projects along the way. Is it exclusive of those or inclusive of those?
Inclusive. We've accounted for everything that we've committed ourselves to thus far.
You can't have accounted for the math stuff, really, because
we're not committed. We're not committed to that.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. So then, basically, it's $500,000 net that we have available. Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
And obviously that's a rough number. You're going to get a detailed estimate next month. Yeah. Before the end. Yep.
Okay.
So I had the same thought that Steve did, and I want to recommend that we authorize spending up to $250,000 out of the unassigned balance.
Is that a motion?
That is a motion.
Yeah. Motion. Do I have a second?
Sorry.
I'll second it so we can keep discussing.
Steve seconds. I move to discussion. David.
What would that cover, Adam, in your mind? I mean, I probably understand that it's probably a little flexible at this point, but what is the main things that we would have to cover here?
The three things right off the top would be a radio system upgrade,
okay.
The exterior lighting, because that's easily identified, and actually there might be rebates associated with that would lower the cost of it. And then the centralized, the nervous center of the security system that I kind of described. So the thing that would be the brains that would connect the door sensors to the alarm systems, to the reporting tool, to the surveillance cameras, that integrated kind of system is something we would look to acquire. So that, in other words, the big expense is buying that centralized system, and then buying cameras or extra door sensors or what have you. Those are relatively can be done on an incremental basis. So you need to use a loose metaphor, you need the server before you can have individual computers.
Howard, and then we'll come back to David.
The lighting system, are we talking LED?
Yeah.
David?
We had applied for money from the state, and at the time the last meeting we were told that the money was we didn't get it.
Correct.
But you hinted at, maybe Stephanie hinted at the opportunity, perhaps it would come back and we would get some at that point in time. Is that still a possibility?
Yes. So just 6 days ago, the Senate added $10 million to that fund. It still has to be approved by the House, but there is a potential for $10 million more being there. So our proposal was not rejected. It was, we ran out of money, so we can't fund it. So we would be in line for some funds should this move forward. And we, pending your motion tonight, will attempt to revise our proposal if we can. We may not be able to, but we'll certainly give it a try. So it could be that the net expense of taxpayers is less than what we're talking about this evening.
Steve.
So of the list of proposed actions that you gave, Adam, I have some very nitty little questions engendered by what I read in the report and what you want to do. Will we have a chance to, in non-public at the end of the meeting, to discuss some fine points about what might or might not specifically be in your... Okay.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? We have a motion to approve up to $250,000 to implement Adam's proposal with a second. David.
I just want to ask another question. This is more about the financing with the public money that's available. And have we really thought through the strategy about how to do that? Should we pay more now of our own money and then request an enhancement from the state, or should we do? I don't want to think about it live, but I'm kind of concerned that we don't have an optimal strategy there.
Meaning that perhaps you want to target a net impact to taxpayers of $250,000, which might mean that we spend $400.
There could be some ways to approach this. I think it behooves us to do the best thing we can for both the school itself and the security that we need, and also consider what the taxpayers would have to do with it, or how to minimize the taxpayer impact.
Yeah, so nothing will prevent us from at a future meeting committing more dollars if we realize we've received a grant for $75,000. Or, the board could say, well, then we'll spend $325, net $75, $250, right? So we could in June, if we're successful with the grant application by then. We may not be. We may not hear till July, in which case it'll be too late.
Steve, and then Tim.
Yeah, so from my perspective, my thoughts on Dave's question, the Safe Havens report laid out a long time frame, very expensive set of recommendations. And as far as I'm concerned, we're making a down payment now on that plan, and if more state money comes in anytime, let's just take 1, 2, or 3 more steps, and we'll be making investments over, I'm sure, the next at least 1, maybe 2 or more budget cycles to add even more to it. So I don't think anything we're doing now will be wasted, and just lays a good groundwork for getting whatever other help we can get.
Tim?
Yeah, that actually dovetails into my question, which is, at this point, you probably don't know what the timing of any available funds would be.
I don't know. I was just.
So, I mean, it could be beyond June 30th, is what I'm guessing.
That's very possible.
So then it's kind of tough to kind of gauge that, try to minimize the taxpayer impact this year, for this fiscal year, if we don't know if we're getting funds until after that. Right.
Amy.
Yeah, that was going to be my comment. I don't think we can really make a decision based on that, unfortunately. It would be great if we knew, but we don't. So I think we have to make a decision based on what we know now that we have available. And then I would be looking to Adam to have a timeline of what is going to be done over the next probably 2 years.
This is a 3-year process.
Okay.
I didn't articulate that before, but I see this as 3 years of, we're going to be talking about this, referring back to it. It's going to be part of staff meetings, student assemblies, parent communications, public forums, budget cycles every year. This is 3 years of work that we're looking at here.
And just to follow up on that, as we move into our next phase of planning our goals, I think we all want to keep in mind that this is a major project, and in terms of personnel resource allocation. We need to keep that in mind as we put demands on our staff. Not saying that we don't want to have our goals met and have our work done, but we do need to be mindful of that, as this is a priority of the board's.
David?
Are there any cameras included in building out the infrastructure with Canada? In other words, I know you want to build out the infrastructure and the control system, but are there any cameras included in that at all?
I would, excuse me, I would expect there to be.
Bobby Brady moment there for you. You're the youngest one at the table, I think.
It was Bobby Brady.
Yeah, it was.
I would expect, I would expect there to be some cameras included in those funds, as depending on how it all shakes out with bids and quotes. Yep.
Howard?
The camera system that we have now, isn't that maxed out? So in order to add more cameras to that, we'd have to put a different kind of a system in.
That's exactly right. And that's what I was referring to about the brains and the, Yep.
David?
The state money is, I'm not, what is the status of the state money, additional state money?
So it was attached to a relatively innocuous bill, House Bill 1415, and $10 million was added as an amendment, as a floor amendment by the Senate. So now it has to go back to the House in a committee of conference to resolve it. So it may not be till June that we find out what the status of it is. It's likely, I would suspect it's likely to be passed because it was primarily a Republican-led initiative, and of course the House is dominated by Republicans right now. So I know the governor's in support of it as well.
So I know Amy has a question, and David, you have another question. I just want to point out, and then you, Dwayne, and then Dwayne has a question.
A couple of questions.
Hold on, Dwayne.
I guess the more merrier.
Well, go ahead.
That's the 250, or about a half 300. That's one question. The other question is, were there any other agencies that you would be able to request improvement besides the state? Other entities? Are the SROs familiar, or ACD familiar with other money that might be available?
I can certainly ask. I know that state dollars are really being funded through this public infrastructure fund right now. So I'm not sure, but we can certainly ask. I've not heard of anything lately. And Stephanie, no. But to your first question, Dwayne, I'm happy with whatever the board allocates. I will spend whatever you give me.
Did you hear that, Dwayne? Okay. Amy?
So just a comment and to partially address the elephant in the room and the difference between the Safe Haven proposal and the Community Council proposal, and that is the inclusion of interior cameras. I just wanted to remind everyone that something that was in Adam's presentation was in accordance with the policy. He will be consulting with both the board and with Community Council on the location of any interior cameras. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that and called to attention. Because I'm sure that there could be most likely some disappointment on with the Community Council on this, but know that their voice will be heard in terms of location.
David.
The turnaround time on applying to the state, Stephanie, you have more familiarity with this, but it's pretty quick, right?
It was very quick. They were meeting at least once a month, and we were turning those around within a day they voted.
And I looked at the list that they had already approved, and a lot of them were just very similar to what we would want. So
some of it can be based on need.
What's that?
Some of it can be based on need.
I asked Gary Daniels that, state senator, and he said no, that it's not based on need. But what?
That might come into reduction.
He's the head of the committee.
So it doesn't sound like there's a tremendous amount of disagreement around what Adam's asking for. There does seem to be questions around the most judicious use of taxpayer dollars, and that we're looking for other sources of of revenue or funding or grants or whatever to supplement or add to the amount that's been proposed by him in his motion. So it's 8:25. It would be ideal if it could be done, this discussion, by 8:30, which leaves some time open for additional questions. I do have one myself, if people don't mind. I don't see a lot of hands up, which is this, and it does go to cameras, as it was such a hot topic. The question I have is there a sense, and I don't know if we can discuss it here now, maybe it's non-public, but is there a sense for how cameras are going to be, you don't have to say how, but do you have a sense for how the cameras are going to be utilized if cameras are installed within the high school? And the reason I ask is because when we originally approved cameras at Amherst Middle School years ago, I think the decision was made that there would not be active surveillance by the SRO, and we later learned that there was active surveillance by the SRO, even though the board had, with its approval, said we do not want active surveillance by the SRO. So do we have a sense for how, do we have discussions with this? And
Well, your board policy continues to say live surveillance is not the intended purpose of the cameras. Live surveillance is acceptable only with permission from the superintendent or his or her designee. So that I think your policy is explicit in regards to the purpose of cameras.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions? Yes, David.
I've been in John Smith's office, and the cameras are live. He doesn't look at them all day, but they're on. So I don't understand what live surveillance is if that's the case. Are you supposed to turn them all off? Is that the idea of the cameras, the policy? I can't believe that's the policy.
I think
What does it really mean?
I think as I interpret it, and I'll look for the board's historian to weigh in as well, but I think the purpose is that the intention is not for an SRO to be sitting in a darkened room watching cameras all day in an attempt to make busts or to find disciplinary infractions. So in other words, the difference between red light cameras and ATM cameras, if you think of it that way. And what I would expect is that there will be times when there's a video wall somewhere that is on, maybe all day one day and maybe not the next, maybe all week one week when there's a particular concern. But I don't expect anyone to be sitting in any of our schools and to be consistently just watching a video wall. That's not, in my mind, that's not the intended purpose. That undermines the purpose of our SRO and also our staff who are working to build relationships with kids.
I also just want to maybe weigh in about what might have been an incidental in John Smith's office maybe 2 or 3 times a day, and I've never seen the camera on. So I don't want to give a false impression that they're being used in a certain way. It may have been something reported a scratch car or a fender bender, but that's not. I don't want to be misinterpreted as the fact that that was real time.
It's actually Steve, and then I'll go to you, Amy. Steve.
Yeah, so I mean, the intent of that live language was, to go back to classical philosophy, we did not want a panopticon where people's whose only job was to stare at the screens all day. The screen happens to be on. If John, I know when John's sitting in his office, is not looking at the screen necessarily, but there is a screen with all the cameras being shown in many cases. And if he happens to notice an evolving situation, then he might suddenly have his focus on the screen for a moment and be doing live surveillance because something unnatural caught his attention. And we were fine with that. But it certainly, the value of the SRO was to have him out among the students, not sitting behind the screen staring at it all day long. I believe that's been achieved to date here in school.
Thanks, Steve. Amy.
Yeah, and just, I think, if we, when we go to some exterior cameras, that's something that obviously that's the whole point, is having, an entrance, someone coming in, someone being able to see who they are to buzz them in. So that's where that would be allowed to go, in my view. But it really rests with having some trust with the superintendent also to provide that permission. what to do, which is why that language is in there.
Howard.
Yeah, I might point out too, because if we do end up getting cameras like at the front door, where Linda Conley would be able to view, that policy will have to change because she'll constantly review that. And that would be a violation of our policy as a district.
Thank you, Howard. Okay, we're here at 8:30. We have a motion on the table to approve up to $250,000 for Adam's proposal. Before we go to a vote, because it doesn't seem like there's any more comments, do you have any input from the public? I invite you to the podium if you have any comments. Okay. Seeing none, are we ready for a vote?
Do a roll call?
No,
you have to do it on.
Oh, we have to because of Dwayne, yeah. Dwayne, we're going to have to do a roll call because of your you're remote. Okay? All right, so we're voting on Pim's motion by roll call. Pim?
Bronster, yes.
Brown, yes.
Ken, yes.
Manning, yes.
Coughlin, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Dwayne?
Harvard, yes.
Okay, unanimous? And the motion passes. Okay, any additional comments from you before we move on?
None, thank you.
Yeah, the only comments I have is I want to thank everybody who's been involved in this. This has been a backbreaker, and from where I've stood observing it, the key to this whole thing is administration and the school board and community council working together. So hopefully that continues to move forward in the future. So thank you for everything you've done, and thank you, Mitchell. Got to recognize the student leadership there. Thank you. As well as Melody Chen, who's not here tonight. She was instrumental in that too, so it goes without saying. Okay, on to informational memorandum of understanding.
Already covered that.
Did you? Yeah. So want to move on?
Yeah.
All right. So moving on. Any public comment on anything we've discussed this evening? Public comment? Okay, our public is
Jim?
dwindling.
On the MOU,
Yeah.
I know Adam said it's up for to be revised, so, but I'm just wondering what the process for that is.
Yeah.
As well as the job description, because I'm interested in making sure that we incorporate an educational aspect into the job description in addition to the typical police officer duties. So
Okay.
something that I had talked to Kelly about, and so. And
Yeah, we can check on the process, and we can even forward discovery today. It is 2-3 pages in the weekly is what we are doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I believe there's a piece in there that's.
So can we get that back again to the board to see what you guys come up with?
Yeah, we can double check, see what the process is for the memo of understanding. And
then
the job description.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I just want to have that come back around.
Yeah, I've taken a note. Rob's heard it, and we
Okay.
can add this into Trello to make sure that it's being covered.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. In the absence of our superintendent, let's move on to action items.
Yeah, quick.
Hopefully we can go through this like a buzzsaw. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve. Steve.
What? No, wait.
Policies.
Policy.
Really? Me?
Yeah.
Yes.
You're a policy guy.
No, you are.
You are.
You are.
Or Amy.
Small disagreement.
I'm turning it over to.
So these are all policies that have gone through the SAU board. So we've all reviewed them and talked about them, and now it's just time to act on all the discussion we've had to get agreement among the 3 school boards so that we have consistent policies across the districts. And because we've talked about them all, I'll just you might want to go one by one and say questions, vote,
Yeah, that's probably a good way to do it. I mean, let's open it up to policy AC, non-discrimination. Any questions? Hopefully we've all had a chance to review these in the packet. Tim?
I don't have a question on the policy. What I was going to suggest is, does anybody have questions on any of them? Maybe we can skip right to that one, answer those questions, and then approve the whole thing.
I'm certainly open to that. Are we in favor of that?
Yes.
Okay, let's open it up to questions for any of the said policy. And by the way, Adam and I have had a discussion too on policies, and I guess the only thing we could call dense information coming to the board that would require us a lot of reading. I know that the proposal from Safe Havens and from Community Council on Security and all of these policies constitutes a lot of reading. And a lot of times we get it 2 or 3 days before the board meeting. So can't handle it this time, but I just want to let the board know that Adam and I have had a discussion around trying to get this done in 2 people weeks in advance so we can look at it. I know that's not always possible.
So in terms of policy, I have asked to have the policies come out to the board, to the SEU board, a week to 2 weeks prior to the board meeting. So we haven't always been successful in that, but that is, just so you know, that's the goal for policy. Not to come out 2 to 3 weeks prior to this board meeting, but that you have, because you know the main discussion happens at the SAU.
Right.
But to get those policies 2 to 3 or 1 to 2 weeks ahead of time. I agree.
Okay.
So we're working towards that, but it'd be good for Adam to, because he will be taking that over.
Yeah.
In another.
And that would be enormously helpful. In addition to other things like the security proposal, we need time to read that.
Yeah.
David, you have a comment?
My only comment about the whole board packet is that if we could divide it up in 2 tranches, you know, maybe even, I don't know, but we had the things that could come out earlier, come out in one packet, and then another week or so later would come out in another packet or something. It doesn't all have to come out at the same time, is my point. And especially 2 days before, you know, our board meeting, where we should be prepared to have read all of it.
David, are you complaining because this says page 110? Is that your issue?
This was a rough one.
Not to mention the 55 other pages you guys got.
Yeah, really.
So, can I respond to that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we've already made our plans for next school year's board meetings, and what we're doing it very differently in terms of the planning. First, the agenda planning meeting will be immediately after so if the board meeting is on 1 week, the planning for the next meeting is the following week, so that we have 3 weeks then to get everything together, and you're going to get your packet 1 week ahead of time. 1 week. I just don't know another way. 2 days doesn't seem to be very helpful or useful. Great way to slip stuff by the board, but that's
not recommended.
Not recommended. So we've already got that planned out. I think I've mentioned before, and it may be in an email, but my senior leadership team of Christine and Meg and Porter and Stephanie, we're going to be every Monday at a building for the day. And so 4 school buildings, 4 Mondays in a month typically. So we'll be in each building once a month. And that meeting will be when we do agenda planning for the month, as well as spend time meeting with the administration, working on building goals, doing learning walks, et cetera. So we've kind of got a system designed where it's all going to come together, we hope, for making this process much more smooth. But to your point, Mr. Chen, at least a week ahead of time. And there will be some things that are day of, like manifest dollar amounts or donations or things that go into the consent calendar, but that will still happen on the day of the meeting. But those are not material. But things that are material, you need to get a week ahead of time, no doubt about it.
Any other questions regarding the policies?
I think Amy said it right. Send it out to you guys. That's what time to read it. So that's, you know, we can do it for our.
Yeah. Steve.
So to preempt the next thing you might be going to say, the normal policy approval process is first reading, wait a month, second reading. This is just the first reading, so we're not going to vote tonight. We're just talking.
Yep.
And if there are no questions, we can put these on the consent agenda next time.
Yeah. Good with that?
Yes.
Okay. Understood, I have that noted. Also, Amy had made the comment under informational on the memorandum of understanding that when we look at the process of the job description, the SRO to include the educational aspect referring to. And then Rob said you're already looking at that. You want to just highlight that one more time?
Maybe offline. I have no idea.
Yeah, no, so for the MOU and the job description, the SRO, I was wondering what the process was for revising that, and then once it's revised, can we get it back here to take a look? Because one thing that I'd had some discussions with Kelly about is, and you, is making sure there's an educational aspect within the job description in addition to the police activities that are required.
Got it. Yeah. So an MOU has a force of policy at the board level, so that's something you guys would be approving, just like a policy.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. We talked about that.
And then the job description also, because right now, as I said, it just has for the regular police officer. If we could add or look at adding an educational component to that as well.
Got it. Okay. So just for the understanding, action items. This is the first reading. Take a look at the policies again. We have time, and then we'll probably include it in the consent agenda, I'm guessing for like the June 4th meeting.
Yes.
Okay?
Jim, if we have questions about it, should we have to hold those questions until we have a public meeting again? We can't forward clarification questions or something like that?
How should we handle that? If there are questions about the policies.
Clarification that you'd be asking me questions?
Which policies?
The ones that are included here.
I mean,
so there is a process for that. So you can go to the chair of the policy committee, which is Galen, or you can go to me as chair of the SE.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yep. And then what we'll do is we can take those to the policy committee so that we're prepared at the SEU board meeting. Right? Steve's looking at me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but and if you just want to know, what does this mean?
Yeah, sure.
That's easy too. Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly, like clarification questions, we can get back to you if there are issues that you have. We typically have policy committee meetings more often than we like, so we can be prepared at the SAU to answer your questions. And then
you enjoy those. Oh yeah.
And then
volunteers.
And what we have done at the SAU is if there are issues, we have punted them back to policy to make revisions.
So what I'm hearing is that nothing goes back to Jim, it goes back to you or Galen, basically, correct?
Correct.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
nice,
Yeah.
just to streamline it a bit.
Yep.
Just so I
Because Jim doesn't know anything about this stuff.
Nah.
Nor does he want to.
I don't want to. Chairs delegate. Okay. We're good? That's the process? All right. We're going into non-public to discuss a personnel issue. So,
Can I make the motion we go into non-public?
Second.
For the RSA
91A3, Section 2AA.
Personnel wise. Now this is security related.
Yeah. So two of them, an A and I think it's I.
I and
Wait, I have it.
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Yes, so, yep, so we're going into non-public to discuss a personnel matter as well as a security situation. Emergent security situation. So, Tim? And then do I have a second? Amy? Roll call?
Gronster, yes.
Brown, yes.
Dan, yes.
Manning, yes.
Coffin, yes.
Stacy, yes.
And Dwayne has left the building.